Then I'll explain why it becomes difficult when in fact it is very easy. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. So the overview in terms of what we are going to do is that first and foremost, like I was saying, I wanted to say that publishing is a must for everyone, be it in academia or outside it. Because whatever research we do, whatever ideas we have, those ideas can never become part of the international world and influencing policy if it has not been published in a peer-reviewed journal. So this is a must and it's important. On the other hand, it is something that is very challenging. It is very challenging. But what makes it challenging is because many people never start. The moment you start, it's no longer challenging. That's the starting point. Number two, many people don't actually consider publishing as something that can be part of their routine life. What I'm trying to say is that all of us are supposed to put this in our diary. So, for example, let us say if you say every Wednesday or every Tuesday from 3 to 4 p.m., that is your writing time. And non-negotiable. No one, not even the dean, comes and say, you go and do this. You say, no, 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 this is my time protected for publishing. If we can do that, we'll see that just that 1 hour that we sit to do something will actually take you so many miles towards achieving publishing. So I wanted to make sure that is very clear, especially to the students, that anyone can make it and it's easy. You just need to set aside time for publishing. Okay, it can be on a weekend. You say from 10 to 12, it's my time. But that should be adhered to almost the same as Salat, in the same way that you have to pray Fajr, whether you like it or not. If you have set your time for publishing, nothing should come to disturb it. Number two, what I want us to achieve again is that we want us to talk about the practical elements that have to be followed in order for you to publish. There are simple steps, very easy to follow, and the moment you are following those specific steps, you'll find that it will be so easy for you to publish. And even the outcome, the actual published material, is going to be of high quality. Okay, I hope the speed is okay.
Okay,
I hope so.
okay.
Okay, good, thank you. Second, we're going to take time to appreciate some of the important elements associated with preparing a manuscript. So number one, we'll take time to understand why it is necessary to know the journal that you're going to send your manuscript to. Number two, we are going to discuss the importance of writing clearly and concisely. Number three, we are going to discuss the importance of having some colleagues, a friend who is going to look at your manuscript before you send it to a journal. Let me make this very clear. The colleague that you send your manuscript to is not supposed to be some very big guru professor somewhere in the United Kingdom. No. Even your colleague, same level, you are a master's student or a bachelor's student, another bachelor student, you give them your manuscript, they'll be able to detect some simple problems in that manuscript. They will also be able to detect some simple things that you need to improve on. So when you're sending your manuscript to a journal, it does not make sense that it should have some very okay, it should not have any minor mistakes. So all those potential mistakes should be cleaned way before you send it for publishing. Then we will practically go through what is supposed to be done when you're writing your research paper. So number one, we'll provide advice on how to write using what is called the IMRAD, how to write the introduction, how to write your methods, your results, your discussion, and how the conclusion should look like. So that's what is the overview of what we want to discuss in the next few hours that we're going to be together. Next slide. Okay, thank you very much. So again, this slide just takes you, and you will see again that it has got so many words. It's pretty much like my message to all the students. Number one, what we're talking about in this slide is that writing is an art. Writing is an art. It's like painting. It's like making any wooden carving. It's like telling a story. Now, when you think of writing as telling a story, it means that story has to be very clear. It has to be very vivid. Somebody should be able to understand what you're saying. But most important, one of the main weaknesses for many manuscripts is that it is not carefully sequenced. So you find that all your ideas are not properly put together so that there's one story flowing. You find that the story is all over, and that makes the manuscript not to be something that can be appreciated by the editors. Number two, we have to know that the manuscript should be written nicely in such a way that it can convince the readers that it is an important one. Number three, for the students, let me say that no one is born with these skills for publishing. No one is born with the skills. Everyone has to develop the skills, and with time, you need to refine the skills. So the only way to do that, to develop the skills, is like I was saying, you can create colleagues or writing teams where you are able to share your ideas. That would be very, very helpful. If you're going to publish or to write for your dissertation or whatever it is, make sure that you're not doing it alone. Have somebody as a friend that you can share ideas. That is the only way that you can improve, or you can make sure that your work is consistently moving forward. Number two, it is also the only way that you can ensure that the quality is high. Okay, so finally, on this one, I would say that our discussion this morning or this afternoon in that side. In Malawi now it's 8 a.m. I know it's afternoon that side. So we'll talk a little bit and we'll focus on a research paper that is quantitative, but we'll also be able to share any ideas around a research paper that is qualitative. Good. So on this slide, you will see that we start by talking about what you're supposed to do before writing. You don't just wake up one morning and you start writing. No, you have to consider that, okay, I'm going to write my manuscript. So before you start writing, what are you supposed to do? First and foremost, whether you like it or not, the starting point is for you to choose a journal. Once you've chosen that journal, you need to go online, find out their guidelines for authors. This is very, very important. If you do that, you find that you're not going to lose a lot of time moving back and forth, or you're not going to lose time where the editors are asking you to do very simple things like following their format. So download the guidelines for authors. You take time to read them, make sure that you understand them. If you have a colleague, share with them and say, what do you think this exactly means? You can also download maybe 2 or 3 good articles from the same journal, and then you see exactly how previous authors have adhered to those guidelines. So what it means is that at that point, you already have a very general picture, an established one, in terms of how your manuscript will have to look in its final state. Okay? You will, at that point, know that your data that you have can write a manuscript that can be accepted by that particular journal. So that has to be emphasized again. You choose a manual, a journal, and then you also look at the author guidelines. Number 2 important here is that when you are selecting a journal, carefully consider its scope and aims. So what does the journal aim to publish, and what do they specifically focus on? So if your if the data you have is different from what that particular journal aims or its scope, you find that it is not going to match their scope, and therefore it cannot be published. So that's very important. Number 3, within it, you also have to know exactly the targeted audience. That journal, does it target nurses? Does it target medical doctors? Does it target a certain population of people? So make sure that as you're writing, you also know the kind of audience that the journal aims to reach. It is also very crucial, because what you want is that when you have your work published, you want that work to be seen and cited by so many people out there in the academia. So you need to know the kind of audience that your journal is able to reach. So in this case, think of your research. What is it that you were trying to find out? And think whether that material is the type of material that this journal would be able to make it broadcast all over the world so that people can cite it. Okay, thank you. Next slide. Okay, then as you're selecting a journal, this is also very crucial. Many students have also suffered a lot of pain coming from the fact that when they were selecting their journal, they did not consider or make sure that there was evidence that that journal was legitimate. There are so many journals out there that are kind of regarded as rogue journals, or more like journals that are just stealing people's ideas. So make sure that your journal, the one that you have chosen, is well recognized. It is actually regarded as genuine and authentic. Number 2, you have to review its guidelines regarding abstract requirements. For example, the number of pages or word limits. There's no reason why you should write an abstract that is 2 pages or 3 pages, and it happens for many students, just because they did not notice that for that specific journal, the word limit was 200, for instance. Again, it is also very important as students that we focus on what is the reference formatting, what is the referencing style that that journal specifically recommends. Is it APA? Is it Vancouver? Is it whatever other things? So even those general things like formatting, do they want font like Roman numerals, or do they want Calibri? And do they want it 12 or 11? Do they want specific margins like within it? Okay, and anything else that the journal recommends in terms of structure. So you will see that it's not a lot of work as in a negative sense, but you are supposed to take some time just to appreciate and understand these little details about that specific journal. You'll find that if you have those things ready from the outset, it will make your life very easy. Number two, it also gives you some kind of energy, because what it means is that you are now understanding the journal, what they want, and because of that, it motivates you to keep writing, to keep moving. Again, it is also important that if your study is quantitative, you also have to understand their requirements in terms of tables and figures. How many tables do they recommend? How many figures do they allow? Like I already pointed out, it is very crucial that you should read a few articles from that journal. That will help you to acquire a sense of how they are generally written and how they are generally structured. It is not plagiarism, it is not stealing, but let me say that if you find very good two articles from that journal that are well written, and you also find them to be real nice, they can help you to act as a reference point. So as you're writing, you'll be able to see whether what you're writing is closely associated to the articles that have been published before in that particular journal. So that's really crucial. So like I was saying, this kind of information that we're talking about here, that you're supposed to gather before you start writing, will help you to know exactly that the journal or the manuscript that you're developing is matching the requirements of the journal. At the same time, is something that is going to fit with the audience that this journal targets. Okay, so moving next. Okay, so I also wanted to make a few things very clear. So this would be really for everyone, students, or let's say for us as members of staff, is that there are a number of the types of scientific papers that can be written. You have scientific papers that are based on original research. So original research, this is more or less like the typical papers that we normally write. So in this case, as a student, you come up with a research topic or research question or research problem, and then you collect primary data. So you go out, administer a questionnaire, and then you have your data. You have it maybe inputted in Excel or SPSS or whatever other packages that you'd want to use, SAS. And from there, you write. And what you're doing is you're proposing new concepts. You're trying to understand a new problem, and maybe you're trying to consider how certain algorithms or devices have been used, and it could be some form of an experiment as well. So this is what is regarded as original research, and this is something that I'm sure most of the students will be doing. Next, so another set of papers can be generated can be written based on reviews. So you have a number of types of reviews. You can have a simple review. In this case, a simple review is where you have a topic or a problem, and then you just collect published material, and then you see what those papers have talked about that issue. Okay, it is also a very legitimate way of publishing. Then you have systematic reviews. In this case, pretty much like an extension of the systematic review. At the same time, you could also have meta-analysis, so where you are actually able to collect from different papers any kind of estimates, and then you re-analyze them. Okay, next. Then you also have case description papers. Case description papers, these are very common in areas such as medicine. I would also say that even in nursing, we should be having a lot of these case description papers, because there are so many things that as nurses, when we are working in the hospitals or any other kind of setting, there are certain things that we meet on a daily basis that needs to be documented. Okay, so in this case, case description papers are very powerful because in many cases they're the ones that can help us understand if there's a new way of doing things, or if there's a new disease that is actually developing because of what you're observing and noticing. So in this case, you as an author would be describing, for instance, the number of clinical cases you've seen. You can be, as a nurse, explaining the kind of management that you have found to be more effective when dealing with that kind of case or condition. So it's really an area where I would say in many cases nurses claim that, okay, we are not publishing because we don't have the time. No, you have the time, or we have the time. At the same time, let me say, we always have some data that is available through the kind of patients that we meet. So we should be able to write these case description papers, very strong and powerful as well. Next. Now, from now moving forward, I want to take you through the very steps that we need to take when we are actually designing a manuscript. The simple steps that I'm going to be taking you through, if you just adhere to them very easily and clearly, you'll find that it will be easier for you to develop a paper. Now, for many journals out there, their manuscripts are designed based on what is called the IMRAD format. So the IMRAD format, what it means is that you have in your manuscript an introduction, you have a methods section, you have a results section, and you have a discussion section. Okay, the discussion section, of course, ends eventually. You're going to have like a conclusion. But the IMRAD as it is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. If you get that part very, very well, you have a proper, well-written introduction, you have a methods section that is well described, you have results that are well presented, and then you've discussed the main findings properly, then you'll be done. You have the manuscript that fits and that is good for any journal that is out there. Okay, next. Good. So we have talked about the things that you're supposed to do before you start writing. Now we're going to talk about how you should write, the sequence of writing. Now, I cannot overemphasize this. I want you to know that whether you like it or not, it might sound as if it's counterintuitive that you have a manuscript that is supposed to start with an introduction, methods, results, and discussion. And yet, when we are writing, we are saying you do not follow that sequence. So I want to convince everyone here that you cannot write a good manuscript if you do not follow the sequence that I'm about to share with you. Okay? So number one, when you are writing, you start with the methods section. You start with the methods section. So you conducted your study where it could have been original research, or it could have been a review, or it could have been any other way that you managed to collect your data. So what you need to do first and foremost is to describe that part. So you say this research, this paper is based on data that was collected through this kind of approach. It had so many people, this in terms of population, who participated. This is how data was analyzed. Okay, we'll talk about the method section properly. But for now, that's where you start. Once you've written your methods, the next step, whether you like it or not, that this is the best way to go about it, is that you should look at the tables and figures. So tables and figures, it means if you collected data, it had data that is numerical, you are going to analyze it and you come up with tables and or figures, which could be anything like so tables, and then the figures could be things like where you have graphs, for instance. Once you've done your tables and figures, then you'll find that it will be very natural, easy for you now to write the results section. Because the results section, what it will be doing is, it will be pretty much like, let me use for now, interpreting what the tables and figures are showing. And then you are writing it in a certain kind of format or sequence based on what your journal says your results section should look like. Okay? Now, once you've written the results section, it's now when you go to write the introduction. In many cases, like I was saying, your starting point would be the introduction. But unfortunately, if you do that, your introduction is not going to be, it is not going to reflect what your research is all about. Your introduction can only and has to represent what your research is about. And for you to do that, you need to have understood exactly what the main findings or what the issue is from your research. So that's why I'm saying introduction should come almost as the fourth thing that you write for your manuscript. Once you've written your introduction is when now you're gonna go to do the discussion. So there's discussion, and then after that you go and state the keywords, okay, as part of the abstract soon after that. Then your abstract comes as the last thing that you write. I have seen this in the so many years I have been supervising students, that students sometimes start with the abstract, but then you say no, the abstract is supposed to be a summary of everything. So how do you come up with a summary before you understand or you know the other things? So abstract is written as the last section. Okay, next. Good. So we have talked about the fact that your manuscript will be influenced by the IMRAD format. But before we start writing, before that sections where we have the introduction, methods, the results, and discussion, you are supposed to have other small pieces that are also very crucial. So in this case, you have things like the title. Your title, the title of your manuscript, technically, we'll see also some of the details, should contain what is called the 3 W's. Your title should reflect what is the issue. Okay, it should reflect who. In this case, you're talking about the players that are focused on. Number 3, where. Is this issue an international phenomenon, or is this thing about Jakarta only, or is this thing about Indonesia as a whole, or is this just for a certain province of Indonesia? So your title should contain all those 3 important things: what, the issue, who, the people or the audience, and then where that study has been conducted. Second, you also have issues to do with author names and affiliates. You are supposed to write the authors. Number 2, you also have to understand exactly how this should be ordered. In all circumstances, if the manuscript is written by a student, the student is the first author. Your professor cannot be the first author, never. It has to be the student as the first author, and then if there are a number of other people who are part of that, your professor can be the last one on that list. Number 2, when you are deciding if there are more than maybe 3 or 4 people, the order should also be decided objectively, depending or based on their input. Don't just bring in somebody and put their name. No, they should have actually done something. At least just go through the manuscript and identify if there were any kind of typological problems, or if it didn't read very nicely and things like that. Okay, then once you have the author and affiliates, you have the abstract. The style for the abstract has to be dictated by the journal. So we'll also see that you have some abstracts that are more structured, and then you have some abstracts that are not structured. So we'll see the difference as well. Okay, then after the abstract, you have keywords. Many journals would specify how many keywords you have to put. Okay, but the keywords are very crucial because they're the ones that precisely express the content of the paper. What kind of issues are being looked at? Okay, next. Good. So at this point, I'm going to take you through all these small pieces. And like I was saying, if you use these slides, you find that it is easy for you to know or to tell whether the different parts of your manuscript are well written or not. Good. So let's start with the title. If your manuscript is going to be publishable, if your manuscript is going to be one that is going to attract the editor-in-chief to send it to reviewers, what it requires is that it should use the minimum number of words that summarize the content of the paper. Minimum number of words. Don't make your title too long. In many cases, many journals would say that your title should not be more than 20 words, for instance. So it shouldn't be more than 20 words. For you to come up with a very nice title, in many cases, it's something that you write at the end. So when you're writing or revisiting the title at the end, what it is going to do is that your title is going to contain some elements of your conclusion. Your conclusion represents the main finding of the paper, or research, it is actually that conclusion which should appear or dictate your title. Another important thing that is very common amongst students is that they use acronyms and abbreviation in the title. No, never. Don't do that. I'm actually trying to behave like an old man who's saying do this and don't do that and everything. But this is really what it is. Don't use acronyms and abbreviation in the title. The only acronyms you can use in a title are the ones that are well known. So for instance, AIDS or HIV, you can use that because everyone knows what it is. But any acronym that is not very known and established, let's say in this case, you cannot use it. Another important thing when writing your title is that you should avoid what are called waste words. Wasting. So many studies you find that the title would say an exploration of something, a something of whatever. Or you could say a study on the relationship between sleep and nurse activity, an investigation of the relationship between sleep and its deprivation, an investigation of sleep problems among people living with HIV. No, don't put the an, the studies, things like that. No. Although you find that it is very common, you even actually find some published articles in journals that use that kind of style. Technically, it's no good, and don't do it. Another important thing about the title is that you need to review the title again and again. Okay? In many cases, when you start writing, you will do more literature review, which means that you'll be interacting with new articles, with new publications. So you will see how many authors before have structured what they have actually emphasized in their title. So you can always revisit your title as well as you're doing more and more literature search. And then finally, your title has to be rewritten in its final version. So like I was saying, this would be once you've reached a point where you fully understand what it is that you have contributed to knowledge in terms of this particular problem that you were researching and the paper that you're writing on. I hope that is very clear. Okay, moving on. Next. Thank you. Let's go to the abstract. We have agreed together that the abstract is something that you write at the end. Okay? In the sequence of writing. Now, the abstract is the most important part of the paper. There's nothing more important than the abstract. Why? The editor-in-chief of a journal will be convinced that they should send your manuscript to the reviewers based on how the abstract has convinced him or her. Number two, it is the abstract that is going to make any potential reader whether to read your paper or even to cite it. So, your abstract should be a brief summary of each IMRAD section of the paper. Remember, IMRAD we said is introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So your actually abstract summarizes all those 4 important components of your paper in a nice and concise way. So typically your abstract would actually reflect that IMRAD. Okay, so your abstract should have the introduction. Whether your abstract is structured, where it is showing the different sections as introduction, methods, results, and conclusion, or not, it's just written as one, let's say like paragraph, still it should contain these different areas. So the introduction or background, this should contain the aim or the objective of your study. The methods should actually be a concise summary of all the things that you did to come up with the paper that you are publishing right now. Your results should focus on the main findings of your study, and finally the conclusion, which should be one sentence or two at most. I want, especially for the students, to mark this. Your conclusion should only be one or maximum two sentences. We will talk about that later. But your conclusion, again, should never be a repeat of the results section. So we'll discuss the difference between how your results and your conclusion should look like. So that is one of the things that makes a paper that is good different from a paper that is bad. Okay, next. So other things that we have to avoid in the abstract is that in the abstract we should not actually put any kind of bibliographical references. We don't put that in the abstract. Another important thing is that we should avoid acronyms in the abstract. The only time an acronym is accepted in an abstract is when that particular acronym or term is used or repeated several times in the abstract. So you don't want to be repeating the same words again and again, and it's going to make it look a bit bulky or big. So that's the only time you can use an acronym. But otherwise, in many cases, avoid it at all cost. Now, if it happened that it turned out to be relevant, that you should use an acronym in an abstract, make sure that when you are writing in the main body, introduction or any other section, that that acronym is defined. So that's because technically would say we don't expect an acronym to be in the abstract, and therefore that's why when it comes to the main body, you still make sure that that acronym is defined. Next. Good. So next, once you've had your abstract, below the abstract, you're going to have the keywords. Okay, you're going to have the keywords. The keywords are also very central, very important. It's the keywords that are going to make your work to be reachable. If, for instance, you wanted, or when you are searching any kind of literature engines, you normally put certain words. So let's say, for instance, for some reason, I've just decided to be using sleep and HIV. So you are doing a study that is looking at sleep and HIV. What's going to happen is that when you want to get information on this topic, you will use words like sleep, maybe sleep problems, and HIV. So if you've written your manuscript and your keywords do not include HIV, do not include sleep, do not include problems, for instance. It means that for the person who is searching for information around that topic will not be able to find it. So make sure that the keywords contain the main words that actually describe your work. Okay? So put the right keywords of the paper to make it more available. You use the words or terms that characterize main domain to which the paper is actually part of. And in many cases, you'll also say some of the keywords should be present in the title. Okay. Finally, just to make life easy for especially like the students, for the keywords, it is also easy for you to just check the other articles that you've read, the other papers that you've read. Look at the keywords section and see the common keywords that have been used in those papers that are part of your main area of focus. Okay, so don't struggle. You don't have to find yourself really struggling to say what are the keywords going to be. No, just look at what the other papers have actually put as their keywords. See if those keywords are matching with the kind of topic that you're looking at, and then you can adopt those that make sense. Okay, moving on. Thank you. Now, let's move on to the introduction. IMRAD. Okay, introduction. The introduction is one of the areas that make many people fail to publish. It is frustrating. It is one of those areas that many people find it as a challenge. So they will start writing and then they rub it. They start rewriting again and they feel it's not sounding nice. And then they will do it again until later they'll say, why don't I just leave this? Okay, let me say that there is a saying that says that if you take a monkey or a baboon and put it on a keyboard of a computer, and then it is just randomly punching those numbers, if it stays there for a few minutes, you'll find that there'll be a word that you know written. What I'm trying to say here is that never ever give up. Don't be disturbed. Just start writing and don't mind in terms of whether it is properly, whether the grammar is good. Don't mind whether the words you're using are very nice and very advanced. No. For now, for your introduction, just focus on the things that I'm about to share with you. Number one, your introduction section should have a minimum of 3 paragraphs and maximum of 4 paragraphs. Not more than that, and not less than that. Okay? So it's a very simple section. The first paragraph, what you do is that you introduce the topic. Okay? The example we are using, it means you're going to say that literature suggests that there is a connection between sleep and HIV. So that's the topic that you're introducing. And then you say a few other things around it. But that's the main issue that you want people to know. That's the main issue that you'll be discussing or exploring in your paper. Then second, the second paragraph is where you review the literature. So in this case, you're going to focus more on statistics. So in this case, you'll be saying that, and I'm using deliberate words like literature, just so you understand. So you say literature suggests that 90% of people living with HIV would have problems to sleep, or they would have insomnia, or something like that. So that's the second paragraph. And what you're trying to do is you want to demonstrate the magnitude. You want to demonstrate the size. You want to introduce how big this problem or this issue is in the second paragraph. The last paragraph, so I'm using, let's say, 3 in this case. You could have had a third paragraph that talks about something else, but let's just use these 3 because it concisely tells us what an introduction should look like. Now, the last paragraph is going to contain the aim or the general objective of your study. So, in the third, what you say is, you would say that this, for instance, I'm going to use this study deliberately. It's not one of the words that are usually recommended to use, but I'm doing it deliberately. So you'll be saying that this study set out to explore the relationship between HIV and sleep among people living with HIV and sleep in Jakarta, Indonesia. So you have introduced the issue in the first paragraph, sleep and HIV. In the second, you have demonstrated the magnitude, how big the issue is. In the last paragraph now, you are demonstrating what you are doing. Okay, and this aim and or general objective is coming based on your second paragraph, which has shown that the issue of sleep and HIV is a problem, and you want to see whether that problem is also the same in the Indonesian context. So that's how your introduction should look like. Very simple and straightforward. Don't make it too long, wordy, and so many other things. Just as simple as it is. Okay, moving second. Next.
Dr. Umar?
Yes?
Do you think you need a break time, like so you can have some drink or whatever, or maybe anything else?
Oh no, for me, I can continue. But if you think maybe the participants wants to stretch a little bit, then we can take maybe 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, so we'll have a 5-minute break, or we are thinking to have some kind of early question and answer session for the material that been delivered previously just now. Question and answer session for the thing that you have to just share.
Okay. So anything that you actually find maybe the best way to go up comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we'll have a 10-minute break. Not necessarily break, but we'll have question and answer session like 2 times. Now and later on after all the material. Okay, is that okay with you?
Okay, good.
Okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. So in the meantime, you might have some drink, and we'll ask questions from the audience.
Oh, okay.
You can have your drink.
Yes, I will do that.
Okay. Okay. So
yeah, thank you.
So Bapak Ibu, kita akan isi sesi ini untuk tanya jawab untuk materi yang sudah disampaikan oleh Dr. Erik Umar. Barangkali ada pertanyaan dari Bapak Ibu, bisa dituliskan di forum chat dan juga disampaikan secara langsung jika ingin disampaikan secara verbal. Silakan. Sambil juga mungkin sekalian Bapak Ibu juga beristirahat, silakan. Apakah sudah ada pertanyaan? Ada yang ingin bertanya, Bapak Ibu?
Saya mau tanya, Bu Ning.
Ya, Bu Desi, tapi Dr. Eriknya sedang tidak di tempat.
Iya, tidak apa-apa, Bu Ning aja yang sampaikan.
Baik. Silakan Bu Desi.
Pertanyaannya terkait dengan kadang-kadang kan kita menulis di judul itu menggunakan a case in Indonesia atau kita meletakkan kata Indonesia atau Jakarta di judul. Sebenarnya pada kondisi yang bagaimana kita sebaiknya menambahkan Indonesia, Jakarta atau apapun di judul gitu. Karena rasanya kalau untuk tiap manuskrip meletakkan area kan kayaknya nggak cantik juga gitu. Jadi mohon saran beliau misalnya pada kasus-kasus yang heboh banget baru pakai Indonesia atau bagaimana begitu Bu Ning.
Baik. Itu saja.
Ya, itu saja Bu Ning. Terima kasih.
Bu Desi. Nanti disampaikan dan mungkin nanti juga Bu Desi mengulang lagi. Saya khawatirnya tidak terlalu sesuai dengan yang Bu Desi inginkan gitu ya.
Baiklah.
Ya, nanti saya coba sampaikan tadi Bu. Barangkali dari Bapak Ibu yang lain, dari Prof, ada pertanyaan silakan.
Iya, Bu Hening. Ya, terima kasih. Ya, saya Heriani, maaf saya tidak ini buka video saya.
Iya, silakan.
Ini kan cara menulis manuskrip ya.
Iya.
Quality, high quality of manuscripts. Yang pertanyaan saya, apakah ini juga yang dipakai untuk indikator ketika menjadi reviewer? Apakah ada tips tambahan sebagai reviewer beyond apa yang sudah diberikannya tentang cara menulis manuskrip ini? So that's my question.
Ya, terima kasih Prof. Nanti disampaikan kalau nanti ada yang mau ditindaklanjuti dari jawaban silakan. Sama-sama Prof.
Alright.
Ya, terima kasih Prof. Silakan dari yang lain. Apakah ada yang menulis pertanyaan? Rina?
Sudah ada 2 orang yang menulis di chat.
Sudah ada?
Sekarang jadi 3.
Oke.
Izin bertanya Ibu.
Silakan. Boleh menyebutkan namanya dan program apa dari program studi apa?
Baik, Ibu terima kasih Ibu. Mohon izin tidak dibuka videonya karena kalau dibuka sinyalnya langsung putus Bu.
Ya. Ini Bu Maiti ya?
Iya, betul
ya.
Bu.
Ya, silakan Bu.
Izin bertanya Ibu.
Ya.
Ya, baik. Terima kasih Bu. Begini Bu, pertanyaannya dalam menulis sistematika review, tapi tidak sampai ke meta-analisis ya. Itu apakah diperkenankan kita mengambil beberapa metodologi gitu dalam kriteria inklusi kita, ataukah memang kalau misalnya prevalensi kita harus ngambil cross sectional saja gitu, atau kita boleh mix, atau misalnya kita menemukan dalam search di database itu ternyata ada quali juga gitu. Apakah metodologi yang kita tentukan atau desain yang kita tentukan di dalam kriteria inklusi penelitian kita itu boleh apa aja tergantung dari tujuan atau bagaimana gitu sebenarnya untuk ketentuan menulis sistematika review gitu Bu. Terima kasih Bu. Itu yang pertama Bu pertanyaannya. Kemudian yang kedua pertanyaannya, apabila kita ingin sampai ke meta-analisis gitu ya Bu ya, sampai ke meta-analisis, mohon informasi terkait menganalisis datanya itu menggunakan aplikasi apa saja ya yang bisa kita gunakan untuk menghitung data statistiknya gitu Bu. Terima kasih Bu. Yang saya tahu kan baru CMA aja ya Bu, ya mungkin ada aplikasi-aplikasi lain yang mungkin bisa kita latihan yang free gitu Bu, untuk kita bisa latihan menganalisis data sampai ke meta-analisis. Itu Bu pertanyaan saya, terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih. Baik, nanti ada 2 pertanyaan ya, yang sudah saya catat nanti disampaikan. Terima kasih. Ada lagi Bapak Ibu sambil menunggu?
Bu Hening, di chat ada beberapa pertanyaan juga, Bu Hening.
Iya, saya perhatikan ada 3 ya, Prof.
Ya, sip.
Ya, ya. Makasih, Prof.
Saya bertanya, Bu Ning, izin.
Ya, silakan Pak Budi Santoso.
Iya,
Silakan.
terima kasih. Mungkin singkat saja, Bu Ning. Pernah minta tipsnya untuk yang pembuatan manuskrip yang kualitatif gitu. Kan rata-rata kalau biasanya kuanti itu sudah ada aturannya dengan jelas. Ya, kalau yang untuk kuali bagaimana? Karena pernah ada beberapa referensi saya lihat berdasarkan jurnalnya, ada yang maksimal dia hanya 4.000 kata gitu. Satu manuskrip itu. Padahal kalau kualitatif kan kita susah untuk bagaimana tipsnya untuk apa namanya agar simpel gitu sesuai dengan keinginan jurnalnya. Terima kasih untuk kualitatif.
Ya.
Terima kasih Bu Ning.
Ya, sama-sama. Terima kasih. Waalaikumsalam, Pak. Terima kasih Pak Budi. Tips untuk menuliskan manuskrip dari riset kualitatif terkait atau termasuk juga dalam jumlah katanya ya, agar lebih simpel dan sesuai dengan yang diinginkan jurnal yang dituju.
Iya, terima kasih.
Ya. Dr. Umar. So seems that people have been enjoying your presentation. So we have a lot of questions, and we did enjoy your presentation. That was very clear, eye-opening, and inspiring. So we have questions here. So I will read it for you. Okay?
Yes.
So the first question was from Ibu Desi. She was asking about when we should include context, for example, Jakarta or Indonesia, in our title. Is that every time we make or we develop a title, we put a context, or in what situation?
Okay.
That's
so
the first question.
Okay. Yeah. Should I answer a question at a time, right?
Yes, I think one by one.
One by one, that would be better. Okay, good.
Yes.
So, we would say that each and every time when you're writing, your title should really contain the context. But now it depends. Let's say, for instance, for many qualitative studies, it has to be the very, very specific context, because in qualitative, it's not kind of generalizable. So in this case, you would say sleep deprivation among people living with HIV in Jakarta. Okay, but if it's quantitative and you've collected it from different areas in Indonesia, and that statistically you can say that what you see is a representation of what is likely to happen in all areas of Indonesia. Then you would say sleep deprivation in Indonesia. So it means your findings can be generalized at a national level. If, again, even if it's quantitative, but your study has just been conducted in one specific location, like Jakarta in this case, even if it's quantitative and it's generalizable, it is only generalizable in that specific context of Jakarta. So your context is going to be Jakarta to reflect that it's a study that was just conducted within that specific area. But every time it has to show the context.
Okay. So the answer is every time. Is that what you're saying?
Every time.
Okay.
Every time.
Okay.
Yes.
Ibu Desi, is that answering your question?
Yes, Bu Ning.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Next question was from Professor Ahiryani, our professor in the faculty. The question was, so we've been talking about how to develop a publishable or ideal or high quality manuscript. And she's wondering if it is also applied for while we are become a reviewer. So is that a similar point that applied for when we are developing our manuscript and also when we are reviewing an article? Is that clear?
Yes, it's very clear.
Yeah.
So we would say that the same kind of things that we are using in order to develop a manuscript, the same kind of elements that we are looking at, are the same kind of standards or elements that we're going to use in order to detect whether a certain manuscript is high quality or of low quality. So we would say that the skills that we are sharing now apply to both as a writer. At the same time, they can also be used for you as a reviewer. So that's a very important and interesting point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
Thank you, Dr. Amir. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Next. Is there any other tips or strategy, additional strategy to be a good reviewer? So I think this is an additional question following the previous question. So strategy or tips to become a good reviewer?
I would say that for one to become a good reviewer, the trick is that you should be somebody who has actually read a lot of articles or papers and in a specific area. Because for you to be a very good reviewer, what it means is that you need to first of all appreciate or rather become an expert in these things that we're talking about. So once you've seen a paper, you'll be able to see whether it has so many paragraphs in the introduction, and maybe it also has some kind of irrelevant material in it. But more importantly, because as a reviewer, you're supposed to be more or less like an expert in that specific area. I would say that, just like I was saying, we are supposed to put specific time for publishing. I think now we've all agreed that Wednesday from 3 to 4 is going to be our time. In the same way, we need to put time to study. In the same way, we need to put time to be reading in the area where we are actually experts. So, for example, if your area of research is sleep and HIV, make sure that almost every other day, or at least a week, should not pass before you go online and check if there are any new papers or publications in that specific area. If you do that, then you are always kept in terms of abreast. You're kept up to date with the kind of issues that are developing in that specific area. So if somebody sends a manuscript that is talking about information that is already well known, you'll be able to know, okay, this paper does not bring any new information. That's because you already know so much in that area. So that actually suggests that if we're going to be experts, we need to read and read and read and read again.
That's the question, the answer for Prof. Yanni's question, I think. Any further question, Prof. Yani?
No,
Yeah.
it's very comprehensive response that you have given me. Thank you so much, Dr. Umar. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, thanks.
We are moving to the next question. So there's a question about what if we mention the method in the title? For example, we put focus group study in the title. What if we do that?
I've actually seen some journals that would accept that, but some of the main big journals don't actually like that, because the method is not the method that you've used kind of acts as one of the wasting strategies. So like we're saying, an investigation of whatever, then you say a systematic review, something focus group discussion, something. In some cases, once in a while, it is acceptable and it makes sense, especially if it's like a systematic review, because you want it to be reachable easily. But in many cases, it's something that has to be avoided. So I think it's in between where we're saying it is possible to put it sometimes, but in many cases, it's better not to.
Okay.
Mm.
Clear. Next question. It is about writing meta-analysis or systematic review. Can we combine or can we involve different method, different design? For example, we involve review cross-sectional and then RCT and then longitudinal study in one systematic review paper. That was the question.
Okay, so if I've understood you properly, we would say that if a systematic review, basically what it's doing is that it is looking at studies that have been conducted in a particular area. So in this case, we would say that any kind of study that has been conducted can actually come into your review. But as you're writing, you're going to make it very clear, even in the methodology section. So where you say this, like where you actually show that the study contained a number of papers that were systematic reviews. It contained a number of studies that were kind of individual papers, and then wherever the nature of other papers. So that is very possible. But I would say that if it is let's say like where you are actually using data and putting it together, what is that called, Ibu Henning?
Meta-analysis?
Yes, thank you. So if it's a meta-analysis, what it means is that in many cases you would take those papers that have actually similar kind of estimates. So let's say, for instance, where they were using odds ratios, or studies that were using something else, because those are the things that you can actually easily find. So you would say that the nature of the analysis you're doing, like in this case, meta-analysis, systematic review and meta-analysis, you will find that maybe you might just focus on a certain type of paper so that their estimates are easy and possible to combine. And like where you have a paper that maybe focus on, for instance, like averages, this one focused on odds ratios, another one used at looked at relative risks and all that. Unless there's a way of converting the different estimates to have some kind of common space, otherwise you would actually really just take those that have got similar estimates for easy kind of analysis.
Yeah. I think let me explain to the person who asked the question in bahasa Indonesia, okay?
Yeah, please.
Ya, so jawabannya pada saat kita menulis review, systematic review, kita dibolehkan untuk menginclude atau mereview juga paper dari bermacam-macam desain, termasuk menggabungkan quali dan kuanti. Tetapi catatannya harus jelas pada saat menyampaikan bahwa review ini juga mereview artikel quali dan quanti dan dari bermacam-macam desain seperti itu. Jadi diperbolehkan. Tetapi untuk meta analisis kita harus tadi catatannya harus homogen, harus ada angka yang bisa dibuat estimate, sehingga sepertinya sangat tidak mungkin misalnya menggabungkan quali dengan quanti. Jadi berbeda untuk systematic review dan meta analisis. Mudah-mudahan saya menjelaskan tidak merubah seperti yang disampaikan oleh Dr. Umar.
Ya Bu, jelas Bu.
Ya, terima kasih. Next
Terima
question.
kasih Bu.
Sama-sama, Dr. Umar. Can I move to the next question?
Okay.
Yeah, it is still about meta-analysis. Ibu Meti was asking about application or software to analyze meta-analysis data. Do you have any suggestion for that? The name of software?
Yeah, so I remember the number of potential actually ways of doing this and the kind of software that is available out there. The only software I've used is the one that I actually used at Johns Hopkins University. I think it was something that is available online for people that are actually affiliated to them. But at the moment, I would say that I don't know any other kind of software that is kind of readily available, even in other, let's say, packages like SPSS and things like that. But I'm sure for packages like R, they should have, it should be actually possible for you maybe to get those particular packages that can be used for meta-analysis. But that's something that I would say, if it's okay, I could take it as an assignment that I check, and then maybe I could share with Ibu Henning, and then maybe it can be given to other people.
Okay.
In particular, I would want to find out if that Johns Hopkins software can be available to anyone if they wanted it.
I think that's clear. Okay, thank you. So next question would be how to select an appropriate or the appropriate journals for our manuscript. How to choose.
Okay.
How to decide which journal that we would like to submit our manuscript.
Yes. So choosing a manuscript is based on a number of factors. Number one, you need to know in terms of its rating. So manuscripts have a rating where it would say that it has, let's say, like a 1.2 or 2 kind of rating. So that's one of the most important things that we need to use. Journals that have got a low rating, those are not very, very good, because it means their manuscripts or their papers, published papers, are not accessed by many people. Number two, it also means that they're not cited by so many other people. So don't actually use journals that have got a low rating. Number two, it is also very important that you choose a journal that has a more kind of specific area of interest. So let's say those that are more specialized, for instance, in nursing, if it's something to do with, let's say, medical surgical nursing, and that's the journal, and your work is in that area, it's better to go for those that are specialized, because it means you'll be putting your work in an area that is more specialized, and people who need to use that information will easily find it. So that's another important thing to look at. The other thing I was saying is that you find that in some cases, certain journals, what are called like rogue journals, that are really just stealing from people's ideas. So make sure that it is a well-known journal that is not just made up by some people who are trying to grab your information or knowledge.
That's all? Yeah, I think that's...
Yes, unless there's something else you can add as well. Or maybe, yeah.
No, I think that's,
Please.
That's really answering the question. We still have a lot of questions on my list, but I think would rather continue the presentation first, and then we can do another question and answer session after you're done with all of the materials. Is that okay with you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead now. Thank you. Thank you for the question,
That's
for the
good.
answers.
Thanks. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move to the next.
Is this one?
Good. Yes. Yeah. So we have just had like the 3 paragraphs of our introduction, and now what I want us to do is now to look at what those 3 paragraphs are supposed to do. Okay, what the 3 paragraphs are supposed to do. So in those 3 paragraphs, you're supposed to remember I said to include statistics, and these statistics normally comes in the second paragraph, or at times it can also come in the first paragraph. So the statistics is really pretty much like a history. The history here, what you're saying is you're trying to paint a picture in terms of how the problem has been, or maybe how long it has been, whether in terms of its intensity, so how big this problem is. So that part is really crucial because it's the one that convinces somebody that yes, we have a problem. Second, in those 3 paragraphs, you need to show that this topic is very important. And how you show that it is important is really a combination of those statistics and also you creatively demonstrating in the writing that the picture we're seeing here is necessary to be kind of dealt with or to be given attention. So you see that in every manuscript, when you're reading it, when a paper, when you're reading it, you will find that the authors try to demonstrate the importance of that specific issue. What I would encourage as students is that every time you're writing or you are reading these articles, make sure that you are able, so this is the assignment I'm giving you now, that when you're reading your next manuscript or article, make sure that you try to highlight what the statistics are, any statement that the author is saying which is demonstrating that the topic is important. Next is also where in the introduction you are demonstrating that there's a knowledge gap. So what is it that is missing? That knowledge gap also comes very clearly in a statement that would actually show that, okay, so while we know X, Y, Z, this part is not well known. So that knowledge gap has to be highlighted, and then it is followed why that gap in itself is a problem that needs attention. But these 4 things that I'm saying, you'll find that if you attentively take an introduction, you will see that it is very easy for you to actually notice that, okay, here's the history, here's the statement that shows that the study is important, here is the knowledge gap, and this is why this is a real problem. Okay, next. Okay, yes, so actually let's go to next. Yes, initially I wanted to have, there were 2 papers that actually were shared, so I wanted to be able to critique those papers directly here, but later I thought that maybe it would be a bit more bulky. So what we could do is have this kind of presentation, but in a more kind of question answer process. Then we could actually kind of consider exploring those two papers and seeing how maybe they could have been improved or something like that. Okay, so fine. In this case, then next is the methods section. So remember, I said this is the first section that you write. The methods section should be one of those that are well written and very concise. What it means is that you need some level of brevity in terms of being able to present a lot of material, but in a compressed manner. Okay, because your methods could be so many things that you did, and you cannot give all the details about what you did. So in this case, you should be able to provide those details, but in a way that is not too wordy. Okay, so it's an issue of being brevity in terms of how you can compress those. So in this method section, you are supposed, number one, to demonstrate the design that has been used. In the method section, there should be a design, study design. Is this a cross-sectional study? Is this a meta-analysis? Is this something that is longitudinal study? Or is this whatever it is, it has to come there. It has to show. Second is that within that space, it should also show the sample or the population. Okay, so you need to show that this study was conducted among people living with HIV in Jakarta, and a total of, let's say, 50 people were sampled using a particular sampling methodology. So was it a systematic random sampling, or did you use any kind of sampling procedure? Was it purposive sampling? It has to show. And another important thing that it has to come in that part is that you should show the setting. So where was the study conducted? Okay, so this study was conducted in Indonesia, Jakarta, and then if there's anything in particular that you want to talk about, that setting can also come there, but in a very, very concise way without making it too big. Another important part of your methods section is how your data was managed and then how it was analyzed. For many students, you find that they quickly write the analysis part, and it's not really clear enough in terms of how they did it. So, merely saying that we used SPSS for analysis, that is not really your analysis. Okay, your analysis should be clear enough to say that you used SPSS as a computer package, or you used Excel, if that's what you used, as a package. You could have used SAS, R, or any other. But the actual analysis is where you're saying that we conducted, for instance, you did a t-test comparing the scores between this group and that group. Or you could say that you conducted a logistic regression where you used, let's say, like for instance, sleep deprivation or quality of sleep as your dependent variable. So people can know that this was logistic regression. Or it could have been that you used structural equation modeling, mat-level modeling, or whatever it is. That has to be clear. One, it adds value to your study because people would know that you know exactly what you were doing. If you just put some kind of analysis which is not very clear, people think, you don't know actually what you were doing. Another important piece that has to be in the methodology is ethics. Okay, so in this case, many journals, the ones that are really important out there, would demand that your study should have been vetted or reviewed by a research ethics committee. So this is where you say Universitas Indonesia Research Committee in the Faculty of Nursing was able, or actually granted, the ethical approval, something to that effect. So this means, again, an important part, sometimes our research might not be published because we did not follow all the steps that are required. So you just went and started collecting data without making sure that the proposal has been seen by the ethics committee. So those are really important things. So in that section, you'd say your study was reviewed by the research ethics committee and whatever other few details around it. So your methodology becomes intact if you followed exactly like what we're saying. Okay, so the setting, the population, the sampling strategy you used, your analysis, what kind of analysis have you used? The statistics should be very, very clear. If you allow me as well, let me say that if it is a qualitative study, the same things apply. If it's qualitative, your analysis should also be very, very clear. So you should be able to say, okay, this was, maybe you did a study that was, you used, let's say, phenomenology, or it's a study where you used any of these kind of qualitative strategies, or rather designs, and each qualitative design would have its own way of analysis. So that should also be very clear. So you use narrative analysis or narratology. More importantly, in the analysis section for qualitative, you should also show actually the kind of framework that you used. So for any analysis in qualitative research, there's going to be some kind of a framework. And I know these details could be for specifically for qualitative. It's something that maybe if need be, maybe Dean Agus could make time for those that are interested in qualitative data analysis as something that we could do. But there are all these things like the frameworks that you have to use. I hope that provides detail. All I'm saying is the analysis section should not just say we did content analysis and that's it. No, it has to be very clear the framework that you used and yeah, things like that. Okay, let's move on. Okay, thank you. So we now come to the most important part of your paper. So that's the results. So you set out to conduct a study, and what you were trying to achieve is that you could actually present the findings. What did you find in this journey? So your results section, in terms of how it is presented, it will depend on the nature of the data that you collected. Was it qualitative? So if it's qualitative, it's going to be presented in a certain way. If it's quantitative, it's going to be presented in a certain way. If you used mixed methods, similarly, it's going to be presented in its own unique way. So for qualitative, you'll find that journals specifically indicate how your data should be presented. So for qualitative, in some cases, you find that they would say, for your results section, the first part should show the demographics of your study participants. In some cases, they also say, let's say, for instance, if it's, let's say you used in-depth interviews, some journals would insist that you actually provide details of each and every participant. So a simple one would be a table where you are saying you have participant 1. So this is supposed to be male, maybe with their educational level and something else. So that when you say in your results that this is a quotation from participant 1, I'm just using that, people are able to see, okay, who was the participant 1? Okay, so it depends on the journal and what they particularly recommend that you should include in this first section where you're showing the characteristics of your sample. Then after that, it would recommend that you should be presenting the findings in a narrative form. So you say, in this study we found 3 themes. The first theme says about XYZ, and then after that you include a quotation or a quote. Okay, so you are picking word for word what some respondent or participant said, and certain journals would put specific number of words that a quotation should have or a quote should have. So you cannot have your study in the results section having a quote that is almost a page that somebody was saying. No, it would probably say your quotes should only be not more than maybe 10 words. I'm just giving as an example. So this is really why it is crucial to do a lot of work before you start writing in terms of understanding the journal where you're going to publish. Then comes the quantitative part again. So like I was saying, in many cases, journals would say you should put maybe 3 to 4 tables. And it would say maybe table 1 is going to contain demographics. Table 2, maybe it's going to be some kind of a characterizing of the dependent variable. And then table 4 or table 3 is going to have where, for instance, if it's logistic regression, it is showing the binary results, and then on the other side, it is showing the more or less like the multivariate kind of results. So the tables will be dictated by what the journal is saying. Then finally, if it's mixed methods, that one too, a journal would tell you exactly how you should do it. For instance, you can, in your results, first it can be a table, and that table would be followed by similar information that came from the qualitative component of the study. And therefore there will be a quote or 2 or whatever it is. So the sequence of how you bring in the qualitative and the quantitative together will also be dictated by the journal. I hope this is clear. Okay, next. So pretty much like I was saying that this part is actually now showing exactly what should be included in that section. For some studies, you are supposed to talk about the response rate. How many people kind of accepted to be in your study versus how many people were approached. So let's say if it was a study that was conducted in a clinic or in a hospital, how many people did you ask to come into your study? And how many people accepted that, okay, yes, I will participate? This is important information in many cases for, let's say, like trials, because you want to see if there was a huge non-response, it could mean that maybe your sample is biased somehow, that you only have some people who actually accepted to participate, and then there was a certain type of people who were not actually participating. So that's why this response rate in many cases, especially for trials, is really important and relevant to include. And like I was saying, then you have those tables. Could be 4 to 5 tables like we're saying. What is very crucial, and it has to be done nicely, is that each table needs to have a title, and that title must be very clear, self-explanatory. So make it very concise but very clear. Also, for every kind of manuscript, it's necessary that your tables should not be too large. Make them small enough. So it means when you're deciding what should be included in that table, you should focus on just those very, very crucial findings that should actually appear. Okay. We're just giving examples here of confidence intervals and p-values. If your study, you used confidence intervals, make sure that those should be included, because that's what makes that study important. People need to know what was the confidence interval, what was the p-value. Similarly, if a study that used, let's say, odds ratios or risk ratios or any kind of estimate that you used, that has to appear in your tables. Okay, in fact, that's the most important part of your study. Yeah, next. Good. Now we move to the section that is very difficult for many. It's the discussion. One of the things that is a challenge for many people trying to write for the first time or second time is the discussion. How does it look like? What kind of information should be in the discussion? The main weakness that many people have is that the discussion is 100% a repeat of the results section. That's extremely bad. Your discussion should be different from your results. What your discussion is doing is that you have the results that has statistics, numbers, of how many people are like this, or how many people are experiencing sleep problems. And what you're trying to do in the discussion is pretty much to talk about the implication of those figures. You are not representing or presenting again those results. So avoid using any statistics from the results section. Rather, you can talk about that narratively, and then if there's going to be any numbers in terms of statistics, it should be the numbers from other studies that you are quoting. Okay, so we are saying that in the discussion, you're going to focus on the key findings. What are the key findings? And once you have those key findings down, you're going to evaluate the data or the results and then talk about their implications. Okay, so simple, we would say that in your results section, you have found that 90% of the people that are living with HIV have problems with sleep. You're not repeating that in the discussion, but what you're going to say is that this study, for instance, this study reveals that many people living with HIV have problems with sleep, and this reduces considerably their quality of life. You see, what I've done there is that I've just used what I've found in the results section and provided an implication. I'm not repeating to say this study has found that 90% of the people have these kind of problems. Let me say, once in a while, you can have in the discussion a particular, let's say in this case, estimate percentage reused, but that should not be the main trend. It should be just once in a while where a particular statistic maybe is necessary to come again so that you can actually show the magnitude or something like that. But in general, it should be the narrative in the discussion. And your narrative should go back to the introduction. Okay, so this is why we're saying that your introduction has to be written after you've done the methods, the other parts, and then you do in the introduction. So you'll find your discussion is going to touch on some of the elements that are in the introduction. For your discussion to look more academically sound and strong, you should also consider to discuss any alternative explanations to your findings. So I'll give an example. You might find that there was a project you were doing where you were telling people living with HIV about sleep, and you find that many people are now reporting that they have problems with sleep.
Mama, ini deh.
Does that mean that now your project, awareness project, has made more people aware about those sleeping problems, and therefore that's why you have more people saying that they have problems? Or can it be that for many years people didn't have those problems, and then all of a sudden those problems have actually just mushroomed? Okay, so that's why it is important to provide an alternative explanation. Now, this alternative explanation should not just come from your head or imagination. This is where you read a little bit more literature, for the literature to guide, to provide some kind of alternative explanation to your findings. So the discussion section is not something that you sit one day, you write it and it is done. No, it is a process, which means you will write today, you give it a few days off, you go back, and then you isolate the areas that you need to find more details, and you do literature review, and you see what other people have said about that phenomenon, and then you'll be like, aha, so it means in this case, my findings mean X, Y, Z. Mark here, I'm saying it can never be a once-off process. It's something that has to be done iteratively. So you go back to literature, you go back to your findings, and then you're discussing. Another important thing is that your discussion should also consider looking at whether it agrees, your findings agrees with other studies. That is very crucial. You should also look whether there are any contradictions or surprises, and the implication of those contradictions you found. So let's say you find that previous studies in Indonesia have found that people living with HIV don't have any problems with sleep, but all of a sudden you conduct your study and then it finds that there are so many people who have those problems. Then you say, okay, so why would it be that my study has found something different from what other people have found before? And what is the implication? Okay, can it be that your sample is different from the sample that people have been using? Okay, it's also very important that you mention any limitations to your work. But most importantly, at the end of your discussion, there should be some form of way of where you actually show the kind of knowledge that your study has added to this existing body of information or knowledge. So that is also very important towards the end. Okay, and next. Good. So finally, we come to one of the very important, I've been calling everything important, and indeed everything is important. So we come to where the final part of your paper, which is the conclusion. Many students or many writers struggle to come up with a conclusion. In many cases, the conclusion is also exactly maybe a repeat of the findings or the results. So for many people who are not good writers or who are not actually trying to write a good publishable paper, you'll find that their results section will be the same or similar to the discussion, and their conclusion will be the same as their discussion and the results. But these three sections are different, and they should be written differently, and their focus should also be different. So when you've written your manuscript, one of the things you can actually use to tell whether it is good or not is to see whether these three sections are different. Okay, so your conclusion should be a summary of the study's contributions to the field. So is there anything that you can claim is new that has come out from your study that was not there before? Number two, your conclusion should not be more than 1 or 2 sentences. You find some published material that is going to have like a whole paragraph of so many sentences. That is not the way. A conclusion should not have the results or the discussion. Rather, it should have a statement that actually shows what kind of new information have you added, and that's what your conclusion is all about. So your conclusion should in a way present the impact of your results. Okay, like I'm saying, what kind of new information has your study generated in the area of your interest? Okay, we can discuss that maybe in this question something. Next, then you also have certain pieces like the acknowledgements. So this is where maybe 1 or 2 sentences where you talk about the people who probably funded the project or the study. So you would say this study was funded by the Department of, or maybe Universitas Indonesia Department of Nursing. So you can do that. Or at the same time, if there was another individual who helped you somehow, but they do not qualify to be part of the authors, then you can actually acknowledge them. Okay, and next. Okay, and finally, we come to the last part of it, which is referencing. Okay, a very good, well-written paper should be the one that is going to use referencing properly. So for references, make sure that you are using the reference style recommended by the journal. Okay, is it Vancouver? Is it APA? Is it any other kind of so many other kind of referencing styles that are out there? So you should religiously stick to the way the journal says it has to be referenced. Number two, use the most relevant references. You're going to have a lot of papers that have been written out there, but you should just concentrate on the most relevant. So those literature or manuscripts or papers that actually talk on the specific issue that you are looking at. Don't use too little references. At the same time, don't use too much. So something like 20 to 40 manuscripts or papers would really be the best way to go. Another important part is that don't reference material that is more than 10 years ago. No. Use the publications that have been published in the last 5 years, ideally. But if there's a certain paper which is regarded as pivotal or a landmark paper or a book or what is regarded as seminal work, that can be published even if it was written 5 or 20 years ago. And finally, let me finish by saying that you should never cite references you have not read, because you might just have used the title and think that, oh, maybe this paper contains things that are close to what you're doing. But when in essence, that paper talks about something totally different. So it would look like you are doing a bad job if you cite work that you haven't read. So I think that kind of summarizes exactly what I thought maybe we could share in terms of what this is all about, and therefore we could actually open this to questions and a discussion around the things we've shared. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much,
So
Dr.
any
Umar.
questions?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. That was very, very clear and very, like I said before, very eye-opening and very informative. I believe that it's going to be very useful for all of us here. And now we are in a session of question and answer. I still have 8 questions that was asked before and have not been answered. So I will read one by one for you. First question was, when we are writing manuscript, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
When we are writing manuscript, can we do self-citation? Self-citation, is that allowed or is that acceptable? Self-citation. When we are writing
Yes.
our own manuscript, can we cite our own article, previous
Okay.
article?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Yes. So you can cite your own article, and it has to be cited in the way that proper as if it belonged to someone else's. So this is actually meant to avoid plagiarism. In many cases, papers would also be subjected to an assessment in terms of how much has been plagiarized. So if let's say, oh, not let's say if, I would say that in many cases you find that you develop interest in a particular research area. So what it means is that you would have published a few other things around that area, and therefore it makes sense that when you're writing this new paper based on the new study, the study that you've done before can be cited and should be cited. So, but exactly where you actually follow the procedures that makes it to be unplagiarized. Don't just say, oh, because this is my work, therefore I will take word for word and I'm not going to reference it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. When we use figure or picture, can we use somebody else's picture and then we recreate or we make our picture from somebody else's picture, or would be the guidance for that? When we
From what I've actually looked at in terms of many journals, they would accept that you use so let's say if it's some kind of a framework from somebody else's, you can actually take it and then you kind of adapt it if it has been adapted, and then you're gonna say that this figure has been adapted from so and so's work, so that people are able to see where exactly it is coming from. But that is only when you think that that material is directly relevant to what you're doing and it adds value to your paper. I hope it makes sense.
Yep, I think that's clear.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I think
Okay.
let me little bit explain in Indonesia. So kita boleh
Yeah.
menggunakan gambar orang lain, tetapi perlu meng-acknowledge, dan walaupun boleh pastikan bahwa kita benar-benar membutuhkan gambar itu. Gitu. Jadi kalau memang tidak terlalu penting atau tidak signifikan untuk artikel kita, mungkin lebih baik kita menggunakan yang kita buat sendiri seperti itu, atau tidak menggunakan gambar atau tidak mereproduce gambar tersebut. Mudah-mudahan saya menjawab atau sesuai dengan jawaban yang disampaikan oleh Pak Erick Kumar tadi. Next question, Dr. Umar. Dr. Umar. So next question would be next question will be about writing a qualitative research report. What is the tip or what is the strategy to write an effective qualitative study manuscript? I think the person was asking because a lot of time we heard about writing a quantitative study manuscript, and he was wondering about what about writing qualitative report, an effective one that meet the journal requirement. To meet the journal requirement.
Yes, so I think, yeah, okay, thank you. So I think, like I was saying, that for writing qualitative manuscript, this is something that maybe would need to be a special session as well. We're just looking at it because it requires a lot of, not a lot, but it also requires certain specific skills and certain specific things that you need to adhere to for it to come out as scientifically plausible as possible. So I would say that, for instance, if it's okay, that I would say if you wanted and there were a number of people who were interested in terms of how to write a qualitative manuscript. It's something that I would be very happy to maybe share with, if they're interested, I would be able to do that.
Yeah, that's very nice. So we will have another session for qualitative manuscript, right?
Yeah, that would be okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is about paraphrasing.
Yes.
So, how to paraphrase or compile some studies. When you write a report, how to compile or paraphrase different or several studies.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I would say that some of the things, and let me appreciate the fact that in many cases, most of us, as we are writing, we are using English. For instance, if you want our manuscript to reach a wider audience, maybe we are forced to write in English, but English is not our vernacular language. So some of the simple skills you can make your manuscript look nice is where you have skills to be able to put together from different manuscripts those ideas in a way that it is not plagiarized, but you're using the languages that were used there. So that's really one of these important skills that you need to do. But I would say that the way you do that is where you're able to read from one manuscript, take the main points, you read from another manuscript, take the main points, and from the other, take the main points. And then from there, you take from all of those and then put them together in pretty much like your own words, but using the same terms that have been borrowed from those different manuscripts. And therefore, it comes out nicer, original in your own words, but actually takes from how those other people narrated it. And if you reference it properly, that's okay. Mm-hmm. Is it okay?
Kuning, mute, bening.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you. Right. Here is heavy raining now.
Oh, okay.
So I have to a little bit scream.
Yeah.
Next question is about writing a title. When we have an abbreviation, for example, we have a project and we name the project. We name the project. For example, brave something.
Yes.
Can we do that? Can we put the abbreviation of our project instead of writing the long name?
Yeah. I think, and this is also based on a few things I've read. In many cases, it's not really the best way to do it, like putting the project in there, because the project, let's say if you say brave findings of brave or findings of HPTN 0.30, that in its own is not relevant except for those people that already know what brave is or what HPTN 0.61 is. So what you need to concentrate in your title is rather the main finding or things that you're taking from the conclusion. So because you're using the conclusion to cast or to create your title, you might find that maybe it's not necessary even for you to use the name or the acronym or whatever from your project. So I would say, unless, let's say for instance, you say sleep deprivation among HIV patients in Indonesia, and then you say findings from Brave project, if you really want to do that. But otherwise, what is important is just the first part where you're talking about sleep deprivation among people in Indonesia.
So you would rather not to mention the project, the name of the project?
I would rather not to mention the project, but that can be included in the introduction. So you say that these findings are from the BRAVE project that was conducted in the Jakarta area by University of investors information, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so let me re-explain this to the person who asked the question.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
fine. Yeah, okay, good. Yes.
Untuk yang bertanya tentang menuliskan nama project, misalnya ini contohnya satu pas, jawabannya lebih baik tidak fokus ke nama projectnya, tetapi lebih baik ke konten atau substansinya. Nanti nama projectnya disebutkan dalam introduction section. Mudah-mudahan menjawab seperti itu ya. Next, Dr. Umar, are you there? Dr. Umar? Dr. Umar? Dr. Umar, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, okay. Because,
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I still have maybe 5 questions. I hope it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. The next question is, somebody was asking about how to write a case study in nursing. He or she has an experience being rejected by the journal with the reason of there is no novelty in the manuscript. So he or she was asking about how to write that, how to do, or how to develop a case study manuscript, not to be rejected by the journal. Yeah.
Okay, so remember we're saying that what is important for your manuscript to be published or to be accepted by a journal is that you should actually show why or how what you have is new information. So it might happen that your case study was a good one, it was a novel, a new one, but what might happen is that when you were writing it, you did not clearly show where the gap was. So I'm not saying maybe you didn't, maybe the person who's asking did not do a good job, but what it is that you need to show the gap. So that's really what is crucial, because if the journal cannot appreciate why they should add your paper to their body of knowledge that they have accumulated, then they will not actually appreciate it. So make sure that you have literature, and from that literature, you're able to show the gap to say this is what is missing. So that's when I think it becomes pretty much like a publishable one. You're showing new information that you're bringing.
Let me translate it into Indonesia to be more.
Okay.
So, jadi jawabannya untuk yang alasan penolakan tidak ada novelty adalah salah satu solusinya yang disarankan Pak Erik adalah kita harus meyakinkan bahwa kita mengisi gap. Agar kita yakin kita mengisi gap adalah kita harus banyak membaca yang current existing knowledge seperti apa, sehingga kita bisa tahu di mana kita meletakkan atau mengisi yang belum ada di dalam literatur yang sekarang. Ya, jadi novelty itu salah satunya bisa didapat dari kalau kita sudah membaca, lalu kita tahu mana yang perlu dilengkapi atau bagian yang masih ada gap di current literature atau current knowledge. Itu mudah-mudahan menjawab. Next question, Dr. Umar. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Someone was asking on how to develop discussion for systematic review, because in a systematic review paper we did a lot of extraction data, we did a lot of results, we have a lot of results. How to develop a discussion section for systematic review? You got my point? How to develop, how to write discussion section for systematic review. Since in the systematic review, we have a lot of data, we need a lot of extraction data extraction. We have a lot of results.
Okay.
So what is going to be the focus on writing the discussion?
Okay, good. So the systematic review, what it is trying to do is that you have all this data, but should be in a funnel way where you are able to demonstrate that from all these different studies, what is coming as common is this issue. So in this case, what your discussion should focus more on what you've isolated from the different studies as the main issue. It is not really where you are trying to discuss each and every paper that you've looked at, but rather you would have compressed the different findings and then looked at the common theme that is coming from all those. And that is the part that you're going to concentrate in terms of discussion. And even your conclusion of that paper is also going to come from what you found as common in all those publications or manuscripts. So it's that synthesis of showing that there's something common that runs around or in the different studies or papers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think let me use bahasa for the person who asked the question. Okay. Jawabannya jadi demikian. Jadi untuk systematic review memang akan banyak hasil, akan banyak paper yang kita review. Tapi bukan berarti kita mereview individual paper, tapi kita mengomentari trennya atau apa sih yang bisa kita ambil dari banyak artikel. Jadi kita tidak fokus ke single paper, tapi tren dari kumpulan artikel. Ya, jadi mungkin itu bagian yang kadang-kadang kita terjebak, kita mengomentari beberapa saja atau satu saja, padahal pada systematic review kita diminta untuk menyimpulkan atau common result dari kumpulan artikel. Mungkin seperti itu jawabannya. Next question. Here is very heavy raining, Eric. Very heavy raining now. Yeah.
Which is very good.
I have to swim. I need to swim.
Yeah.
Next question. Can we use an article that the data was taken from messenger chat between among parents with sick children?
Oh, okay.
Can we use that article? So the data was taken from messenger chat with two parents with sick children.
Okay, so if I've understood you, you are asking whether we can collect data or we can use an article that was written based on data that was collected from moms who had sick children. Okay, so I would say
but excuse me, the data was taken from the data collection was like from the messenger chat.
Can I?
Oh, sure.
So she's trying to develop a manuscript based on conversations in WhatsApp group. So how can we, or have you an example? Do you have an example of an article that describe or telling about conversations from WhatsApp group, for example? So do you have any experience? Yeah. Do you have any experience to read a paper or to write a paper based on conversation from WhatsApp group?
Yes. So I can answer that. So in terms of data, nowadays people are being very creative in terms of how they can actually access data. So in this case, let's say, for instance, if you're, for as long as you've made the appropriate arrangement so that the people who are actually part of that WhatsApp group, okay, if it's possible that they can actually give you a go ahead that you can use their information, number one. Number two, if you make it very clear that you do not use their names, or if you do not use any information that is going to show that this came from Ibu Henning, or that came from Esteem, then that makes it easy for that material to be published. But if you're gonna involve or include any kind of information that can actually show or can actually tell somebody who these people were, then in terms of ethics, it would not be acceptable. But if you remove all those things, you can actually publish work from WhatsApp groups, you can from anything else. Pretty much I think that's going to be a qualitative study, I suppose. Okay.
We still have 3 questions, Dr. Umar. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, okay, yes. Okay.
Another question would be about ethics. What to write in the method section about ethics? What points that need to be put in the ethics section in the method?
Okay. So in general, we would say that in the ethics section, you need, it depends on different journals, but for many journals, you would have to say that this study was reviewed by ethics committee of the Universities of Indonesia, and then you also have to include the number of that the ethics number or ID. So it would say UN 70 something, that has to be included. So you need to include that.
Ya. Jadi jawabannya untuk yang bertanya tentang apa yang perlu diletakkan terkait informasi tentang etik adalah nama komite etiknya dan nomor, ya, nomor atau biasanya pada saat kita mendapat surat atau video keterangan lolos etik ada nomor. Kalau di luar biasanya ada ID-nya, ID untuk IRB. Kalau di Indonesia mungkin nomor surat lolos etiknya. Gitu ya. I will move to the next question, Eric. Okay. There is a question about some journal, reputed journal, would ask data, additional from the manuscript. They will ask the data, like the raw data. So the question would be, what kind of data that need to be provided? What kind of data? The raw data or a half of data, for example, something like that.
Okay, good. So it is becoming a very kind of, it's becoming a trend that journals would ask you to provide the data that you use for that particular manuscript. So I would say that it depends. Let's say you did a very big project, and from that project you collected a lot of data from different variables and all that. But what you've done is you've just used certain variables for you to write this particular manuscript. What you're going to do, or what you can do, is make sure that you put together, from that data set, those variables that you've used for this analysis. And you don't have to stop there. If you want, you can add a few more other variables that maybe were not part of this specific analysis. So that's the data set that you will actually put together and send to the journals. In many cases, it wouldn't be recommended that you just take the entire data set with all variables that are there and then submit it. So I would say that you clean and come up with the variables that are really more important or directly important to the manuscript you've submitted.
Jadi jawabannya untuk yang bertanya tentang data yang diminta oleh jurnal, yang disampaikan adalah bukan data keseluruhan, tapi data yang paling relevan dengan data yang ditampilkan di manuskrip. Data yang paling relevan, bukan semuanya. Jadi tadi Pak Erik menyampaikan tidak dianjurkan untuk submit semua data. Yeah. Next question, Eric.
Yes.
for research, for qualitative research, can we split into more than one manuscript for one study? For one qualitative study, can we split into more than one manuscript?
Okay, good. So I know this is something that many people know about Salami Publishing. Let me say that Salami, in quotes and quotes, it's possible, it's acceptable, but it is determined by the quality and quantity of data that you have. So if you conducted a study which is qualitative and you used maybe a number of focus group discussions or in-depth interviews, but you can see that maybe certain focus group discussions had certain specific things that it focused on, and another set of focus group discussion had also certain specific elements that it focused on. And if you're going to write a paper using all this data, it's going to make your paper look more cumbersome because it is taking ideas and information from all kinds of things. Then you can split it, okay? But as long as when you are splitting it, make sure that each manuscript in its own has got adequate information to make it an independent paper. Okay, so because sometimes if you're gonna just split the data so that you have two manuscripts, but each manuscript is some kind of a low level or quality because the data is too little, then it doesn't look good. So in this case, you can, depending on if it's a lot of data and you see that when you split it, each paper is going to be good enough, adequate enough in terms of the depth of the quality and the quality of the information, then you can actually have two manuscripts or even three manuscripts if there's a lot of information. Can I also mention just something, please, that for each and every paper that you write, ideally it should have three main themes. So if in the qualitative study, when you split it, each paper has got three main themes and has got adequate supporting information around it, then that's perfect. You can go for it. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I think, yeah. Let me explain bahasa little bit. So, jadi boleh kita men-split menjadi lebih dari satu manuskrip, tetapi pastikan masing-masing manuskrip berdiri sendiri, tidak berkaitan, tidak tumpang, tidak mengulang, dan pastikan masing-masing manuskrip punya 3 atau 4 poin yang berbeda. Jadi seperti itu untuk menghindari pengulangan atau tadi salami, ya, artinya seperti kita memecah-mecah gitu, satu studi kemudian asalkan menjadi banyak artikel, dan jadi akhirnya jadi kualitas manuskripnya jadi rendah karena memaksakan untuk menjadi banyak sementara poinnya tidak cukup untuk dibuat menjadi lebih dari satu manuskrip. Demikian untuk pertanyaan tentang manuskrip terkait riset kualitatif. Last question, Dr. Umar. Last question on my list. How to develop an opinion in discussion section? How to develop an opinion? I'm a bit confused actually. How to, maybe, is that allowed to put on opinion, and if it is allowed, how to do that? How to organize or how to manage that?
Yeah. Okay, so I think we can say that it is possible for you to bring in on your own opinion or idea or conviction, but that should come out, or that should be an opinion that in a way can be backed by the evidence you have. So make sure that your opinion is not really just hanging, but rather that piece, that part is actually coming from the data that you have, although there might not necessarily be any direct evidence that you can show. Okay, but there should be some kind of backing why you would say you're saying or you are claiming this is what it is. Okay, but only when there's that kind of enough evidence that you can actually say it is backing your opinion. In fact, you would say that what is regarded as implication of your evidence is really your opinion. So you're using yourself as a vehicle at the end to say, okay, so my research, what it has done is to show that there is this issue like? So it's really your own version of what you think has come out. So I would say it is possible, and that's what it is, in fact.
So you're saying that it is acceptable as long as it is backed or supported by evidence?
Yes, exactly. That there's underlying evidence that can support that opinion.
Jadi jawabannya, oke. Jadi jawabannya boleh ada opini, tetapi harus ada underlying evidence untuk mensupport opini kita. Demikian. Apakah masih ada pertanyaan lagi? Udah, masih ada pertanyaan lagi? Atau yang dari dalam? Di sini azan.
Hilang ya?
Ada.
Yeah. Any more question? Any other question? No more? Kalau tidak ada lagi, saya kira cukup ya, Bu Des.
Iya, betul.
Ya. Dr. Umar? Dr. Umar?
Yes.
I think we've come to
I'm here.
the end of the session. There is no more question. Thank you so much for your presentation. Okay. It's been very, very helpful for us. So, and the answer also been like make things more clear for everyone who asks questions. So, thank you so much. Don't leave now, but I would like to ask Ibu Desi to close the session, to give us closing speech.
Ibu Desi, that's enough.
Ibu Desi? Okay. So I would like to ask Ibu Desi as the research manager to give a closing speech for this session. Please, Ibu Desi.
Okay, thank you for the planning. So first of all, I would like to say thank you again to Dr. Umar, who would like to share your experience to us. And some participants mentioned in the chat room that your explanations are clear, and we learn a lot from you. And I think the most important thing to do now is to start writing, right? Because if you just listen and listen without writing, so it will be useless. As you said, Dr. Umar said in the beginning, we have to provide at least, or you can try 1 hour a day or a week to write something. So if you do that, then you will have an output from your writing time. So for all of you who still stay here, so let's start to create our own writing time and start to write. So that's the take-home message for all of the people, including me in this Zoom room. Thank you, Dr. Umar, and thank you all the participants, and we will see you again in the next lesson event.